So I mentioned the booths that are out there. We've set up specifically 2 separate booths, one that is focused on DPDP, the other one that is focused on the other 2 compliances. There are demos in there. Some of the people in my team are there. They can show you the demos. But if you feel that that's not sufficient and you want to learn more about these things, please set up a time and we can spend more time with you on these specific compliances. All right. Let's talk about maximizing your security investments. And I talked about the fact that we have been doing a lot of different integrations, and we feel that those integrations help provide a better full end-to-end security architecture. 2 of the integrations that I want to bring up right now are, one is with Forcepoint, and the other one is with Symantec Broadcom on their DLP systems. Now, one thing that I would say about a DLP system is that typically when you implement DLPs, and I've dealt with DLPs now for a number of years, you have 2 things in mind. The first thing that you have in mind is that I want to be able to make sure that I can monitor everything within my perimeter, everything that is within my network. I want to be able to get logs. I want to be able to know what is happening within my perimeter. The second thing, and I joke about it and I say DLPs are binary systems. They basically have one of the 2 functionalities. It's a 0 or 1. They can either let the content through or they can block it, right? So what's the problem with that? It's great to have those 2 capabilities, but like I mentioned, that monitoring is perimeter-based. That monitoring is within your network. But what happens when that data leaves the citadel, the team of this show? What happens when that content gets out? And all of us know that a lot of our users now are outside your perimeter. How can DLP deal with all of the users that are working from different locations and or your partners, the other companies that you're dealing with? And the second thing is blocking by itself is typically something that increases the user friction. And by that, what I mean is users are used to being able to distribute data. They're used to being able to distribute what they're doing and work with people in different locations. And when you block something, you in effect have really stopped the workflow that they're used to. So is there a way around that? And we're here to say that yes, there is. And that's when you bring in Seclore and DLPs and you connect them together. So we have integrated with both Symantec and Forcepoint's endpoint DLPs. And together, what we can do is 2 things. One is that when it comes down to monitoring, now we expand that monitoring for you. So the monitoring is not just within the perimeter, but we keep track of the data regardless of where it goes and throughout its life cycle. And that gives you a full end-to-end monitoring capability. The other thing is that we say that you don't have to only block the content. Now, blocking could be one option, depending on what your rules are from a security perspective. But now you can also do full security. You can protect the data and not only rely on blocking of the content. What's the benefit of doing that? You don't break the workflow of the users. You lower the friction with the users. You don't stop them from being able to do what they want to do. What you also get as part of this is that you also can use the other capabilities that Seclore brings in with classification, with dynamic watermarking, with the full encryption capabilities to be able to build a more robust but also a more secure environment that is fully monitored and viewed. What we're showing in here is our risk insight dashboard that shows you where the content has been, but also shows you the level of risks that you're being exposed to. I'll touch on that a little bit later. Now, those are not the only companies that we've done integration. If you had to create a slide of all the different companies that we have done integrations with, it would be multiple slides. But there are a number of them. And depending on what is the capability or what is the purpose of that device or the application, we work with various different companies. Microsoft's SIM, for example, SkyHigh from the perspective of CASB, and of course, Symantec and Forcepoint are some that we have integrations with. All right. Again, we set up some demos. We wanted to show you what we have, both with Symantec and Forcepoint. There is a booth set up over here that we are actually showing the actual integration that has been done with both of these 2 companies. So please stop by. The integration, again, is not just what they bring in. It's really showing the whole end-to-end of what Seclore and the DLP do together. OK. In addition to the integration with those security technologies, one thing that I always hear from our customers is that it's great that you have an inside dashboard. It helps us know the level of risks that we're dealing with, but we want extended reporting. We want to be able to generate much more complex reports. For that reason, we work with a number of different companies, and we have done those integrations, and there are integrations available. There's integrations available with various SIEM tools, SIEM tools that are out there in the market, IBM's Radar. We have Splunk integration and also Power BI. And again, another thing that has come up in the past is that sometimes some of these tools are very expensive. I'm not sure I want to go and spend the money on them. With Power BI, you can limit the scope of the project to as little as it's running on one machine. You can run a client version of Power BI on one machine, bring our logs into it, and generate all sorts of different reports. And we have done this with customers, and they're using those reports today. Okay. Let's talk about supply chain risks and IP security. So when it comes down to supply chains and IP security, and this is something that I see all over the world, is that there's a lot of concerns around what can I do to make sure that my data remains secure when I'm dealing with so many different vendors. And it just happens that in larger organizations, in larger companies, sometimes they don't even know exactly who are all the different supply chain companies that they're dealing with. And sometimes they haven't negotiated specific contracts around security with those partners. They have put in contracts that says how they're going to be exchanging information, but there isn't much in there about how you manage the security of that content. And because of that reason, a lot of the malicious attacks are usually started in supply chain environments. And they just happen to be very costly. I'm not going to go through the numbers, but they just happen to be very costly. But more importantly, and I just had this conversation with 2 or 3 CISOs in the US, they said it is the most difficult one to track and to go after. Why is it so difficult? Because it's not easy to, when you don't know necessarily where your data is, where it's ending up, which vendor you're dealing with, and also where it started to leak, it's really hard to go and do troubleshooting and try to figure out where it started to leak. Now, what are the different types of contents that are leaking? Many times, it's the most critical content that the company has. Company IPs, for example. In the manufacturing world, we deal with a lot of our customers that are dealing with distributing files, CAD files, that have their company IP. Let's say this is a semiconductor company. This is the architecture of the next chip that they're working on, and they just happen to work with a third-party company because they have to have that company manufacture the chip for them, and that happens to leak out. And when that leaks out, it is millions and millions of dollars of loss for that company. So this becomes extremely important, and it's something that at Seclore we really take seriously. And we want to make sure that we have a specific focus on this area. So what are we doing about it? Of course, enabling the ability to be able to do protection, add control to the content, and also making sure that that content is being tracked is really, really important. But we want to go farther than that. We have a dashboard today. It's our Risk Insight dashboard, which gives you the ability to be able to look and see where the risks are. You can look at that on a per region basis. You can look at it on the type of content that the users are using, and also the distribution of how that content is being distributed to different domains and different users, which is quite useful and something that a lot of our customers take advantage of. But we want to go a step farther than that. And I mentioned in the beginning that I'm going to be talking about a little bit of the future as well. So let's talk a little bit about what's coming. One of the things that we're working on now is to, and we'd love to get your inputs on this, by the way, if you are dealing with supply chain security and supply chain risks. One of the things that we're working on right now is a new dashboard that provides us ability to look at the risks and also get much more visibility. Not just visibility about where that content is, but can you go down one step more and look at the risk specifically based on the suppliers? And or look at the risks based on the specific projects that are ongoing. And or now go and look at it and see in which regions you have the highest level of risk, and then put the focus in those regions to be able to address the risks that are occurring. And this is something that we're working on right now. Again, we do have demos and mock-ups of what we're thinking about. Love to get your inputs on it. I'm quite excited about it because this is really the next step of diving down deeper into securing supply chain. We have other things that are also in works. We're going farther down into specific file formats that are being used in the supply chain distribution for manufacturing and semiconductors. All right. talked about the demos, so let's go to the next step. The next thing that I wanted to bring up is AI, and I talked about the two aspects of the AI. Let's just start with what do we do about AI risks. Now, we talked about the fact that a lot of the users at companies are potentially using different types of AI tools. The two that come to mind right away, Copilot and also ChatGPT. One thing that a lot of times people do is they go into a document, they copy a specific portion of the document and they drop it into ChatGPT or into other tools. You can use Gemini for that. You could use OpenAI's other tools and be able to do things with it. Now, obviously, that is not a malicious act. This is a user, this is an employee that wants to get their job done and want to make things simpler for themselves. So maybe they're just doing a simple summarization. Maybe they're taking that data and they want to change the wording of it, make it look better, and then put it in an email and send it to somebody. So it's not necessarily something that they're maliciously doing, but it is quite dangerous because that information that they just copied could have sensitive information within it. Using Seclore, you can specifically disallow those functions. You can disallow the ability to be able to do copy, cut and paste, and therefore stop the LLMs from going in and getting trained on that specific information that is sensitive. The other thing is that many times Gen AI tools are set up to go and discover. They're set up to go through all the content that is at rest at various different repositories. So what happens when they do that? They go through all of that content and they, in effect, are getting trained on all the information. And we have seen cases where you look and you do a search and you find out information about a completely different department's sensitive information from where you are. And that's obviously quite dangerous. Again, one of the important capabilities of Seclore is to make sure that we protect the content when it's sitting at rest and not allow the AIs and the LLMs to go in and get trained on that data. Now, I want to talk about what else is going to be coming up, and that's something that, again, we'd love to show you. It's the ability to actually go and talk to these AI tools, to go to Copilot and then later to ChatGPT as well, and tell those AIs that they should not be able to go through that content regardless of what the state of that content is, whether the user is opening them up or they're sitting at rest, that we actually control those AIs as well. And that's a new capability that is going to be coming. All right. Now, let's talk about what can we do to leverage AI. We talked about AI as a risk. Now, it's also possible to use AI to improve our security posture, and that is something that we're putting focus on. Another thing that is upcoming, we do have a demo of this as well. So let's say that you have a dashboard. And just for the lack of better name, we quickly called it Seclore's Copilot. Maybe we'll get a little bit more creative and come up with a better name for it. But for now, let's just call it our Seclore Copilot. A place that you go in and you can do all sorts of queries. You can ask different questions. Simple questions like, tell me a little bit about the inventory of my machines that actually have Seclore deployed on them. You can look at the overall Seclore coverage. You can look at things like what versions I'm running, how many of my clients have been updated, and so on. Or you can do things that are potentially more interesting. Like, for example, how has Seclore helped me prevent the risks that I'm dealing with? And let me show you some dashboards on that. Here's an example. The user has asked, how has Seclore prevented data leak this month? And here we're showing that the total unauthorized activities prevented were 320,000 plus. And this is where they're coming from. Some are on Mac, some are in hot folders, which is a capability that we have. Some of them are in a repository, on SharePoint repository, and some are on Windows machines. And then go further and say, not only that, we can also tell you about the type of activities that we prevented. Where did we help you with? In some cases, this was access attempt. Somebody was trying to access a file that potentially was seclored or protected. Some of them is file sharing. Some where somebody tried to print a document that wasn't supposed to be printed, and we had set a tag for not printing. And or somebody's been trying to do screenshots. Another example is this user in here has asked which teams are responsible for these unauthorized accesses, for these unauthorized activities. And again, we're showing this information based on the specific domains. So there are people that are in Acme Corporation, Access Live, and so on, and the numbers and the percentages. And that helps you potentially as a security person to be able to put more focus to address your risks in those specific departments. You can also go down and look at those based on the geographies. Where have those activities been prevented? Some of them were from China, Russia, North Korea, and so on and so on. So this also gives you geo-specific information. And this is all done by simple queries that you're doing by just typing a question to the system. We do have demos of this, what I just showed you. There are additional questions that you could ask, as I showed before. So please do stop by and take a look at those. One thing that I personally really value, and I have to say I was excited to be coming to this event, was to talk to you guys, meet you guys, and also learn from you. This is not a one-way thing. It's not just me standing over here and telling you about all these things that we're working on. Love to hear from you about what you're looking for as well. So please do talk to us. Myself, Prakash, as I mentioned, and many of the others in my team are here, and we'd love to see you and hear from you. Thank you very much.